Welcome to this first video on what we're going to do in terms of some science activities and some science lessons going forward. In all of these videos, you're welcome to stop it and go back, take a look at things that you might not understand, or you can watch it all the way through the first time, figure out what materials you need, go get those, and then come back and look at the video again, one little segment at a time. So let's go back to what scientists do, and that is they always are keeping a record of what they're learning, and they often do that in a notebook. So if you have a notebook, go ahead and get that, and I'm going to talk to you about how you can begin to work in your notebook. I have a notebook much like the picture you see right there. This is called a composition notebook. I really like this because it keeps everything in one place. I don't have single pages that can fall out and get lost. I can glue other materials in here. I can draw in here. I can write in here. Mine actually happens to have lines in it. I really like that. So you might have one of these laying around the house, or for today, if you want to just use a regular piece of paper, and then later get a composition notebook, that would be really cool. Then we are going to talk about throughout all of our lessons what are called science and engineering practices. These are things or skills that scientists use when they do their work. In this activity today, we're going to be asking questions, and that's number one, science and engineering practice. And we're also going to be obtaining, which means getting, evaluating, which means trying to figure out how valuable the information is, and then we're going to communicate. One of the ways that we communicate with ourselves and with others is in our science notebook. There's a place for you to download and print the Science and Engineering Practices page, and what I'd like you to do is download it, print it, cut it out, and then tape it someplace at the beginning of your notebook so that you can always go back and look at that as we are working on various science and engineering practices. So do that in your notebook. The next thing I'd like you to do is find an object, because we are going to begin to make observations about that object, because that's what scientists do. They're using their five senses. They see things, they smell, they hear, they touch, and from time to time they taste. We have to be really careful in science class that we are really cautious when we taste something, because there's a lot of poisonous things out there, and there's lots of things that don't taste very good. But when it's safe, and if we're doing an activity that I can tell you it's safe to taste, you can do that. So when we observe, when we are looking at something, we want to make sure that we are not only looking with our eyes, but we're smelling it, we're hearing it, we're touching it, because we want to know as much about whatever it is we're observing as we possibly can. Here's an example from somebody's science notebook, and maybe you can't read that, but I'll read it. It's a rock from Door County. So the person is telling us in a title what this object was that they're looking at. They dated it. This was June 12th in 2020. They told us the location of it. It was on the shore of Cave Point County Park. Then they took notes about what they were observing, and you can see that they are also asking questions about the object that they're taking a look at. Then they drew a picture of it, and in this case it's a pretty simple sketch. It just kind of has a rough outline. They put some labels. They said there's a dark spot, it's smooth in one place, it's white in color, and there was a break in it. So that's a as an example of a pretty simple notebook entry of an observation. Here's one that's a little bit more detailed. This person was on a walk. They found a snakeskin. They included the date, and then they told us where they found it. They were walking along a path in their neighborhood, and they found the snakeskin, and then they picked it up, and then they taped it right in their book. That's a really cool thing to do. And then they drew a picture of where they found it. Down below, on the right-hand side, it says the asphalt path, and then it shows where the snakeskin was in the grass. And then they told us a little bit about the weather and things like that. So when we do our observations, You're going to draw a diagram. You're going to put the date down there. I didn't put this on my notes, but you can put a title down there. Tell us where you are looking at this, and then any notes that you want to take also go there. So what object do you look at? You can grab anything. Maybe I want to observe this tape dispenser. There's a lot I can observe about this tape dispenser. This one's kind of cool too because I can smell it. It smells like tape, all right? But when I feel it, there's a smooth side, and then there's a sticky side, and then the dispenser, the container has a really rough edge right here that allows me to rip off the tape. So there's lots of things that I can observe about a tape dispenser. What about even something as simple as a ruler? This is kind of cool because there's different pictures on the ruler. There's different numbers. There are different spaces in those numbers. So lots of things I can observe about a ruler. Maybe you've got an aquarium. Maybe you have a pet at home. Maybe it's not snowing outside, so you can go outside and find some object and you can observe that particular object. Then put all of that information in your notebook. Then the last thing I want you to do is ask questions about the object that you've observed. Try to challenge yourself to ask 5 questions that you don't know the answer to about the object that you're observing. After you've written 5 of them, try to write 5 more. After you've written 10 questions, see if you can write another 5. See if you can get somewhere between 15 and 20 different questions about the object that you're observing. Then, if you have time, begin to answer those questions. So, how do you find answers? Well, you can look on the internet. Maybe you've got a science book at home and you can look up the answers in there. Maybe you've got a science expert in your house and you can ask that person if they know the answer to the question. Maybe you can do some kind of a little test and figure out the answer to the questions that you're asking. So that's how we set up a notebook. That's your first assignment, is to observe an object and then ask questions about it. We'll share our notebook entries a little later, but that's it for this lesson. Thanks.